Steph. Hi, everyone, and thank you for making the time to join us tonight. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. I'm Anne, counselor, psychotherapist, and coach from Melbourne. I spent over 2 decades in corporate marketing, working for multinationals, and I have seen the work life balance swing from unbalanced, where there was a strict divide between work and life, to trying to achieve balance, and now back to what I feel is unbalanced again. We take our whole selves to work, we take our whole selves home, but sometimes not having boundaries between work and home. And with the increasing pronatalism that we see these days, I find there are instances of reduced morale and productivity in the workplace for us who are childless, not by choice. I'll hand over to Rob now to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Robin Hadley. I live and work in Manchester in the UK. And I'm a researcher, a consultant, if people want to consult me, speaker, teacher, writer, and all around the impact of male childlessness. And that's because I am a childless man and I was really desperate to be a dad in my 30s. I'm now in my mid 60s and I'm still sort of desperate to be a dad on occasions. So it comes and goes. And now my peer group are becoming grandparents. So that's another form of loss and a reminder. So all things to do with male childlessness interests me, and I was really fortunate just the other year to be involved in a research project at Manchester Metropolitan University, examining people's experience of fertility treatment and the workplace. And I took a special interest in the men's experiences, and I found there was plenty of overlap with the other research I'd done on uh, circumstantially childless men. So that's me. So back to Anne.
It's really interesting what you say, Rob, about that the longing that comes and goes. I'm the same vintage as you, now entering the grandparent phase. And, there are still times when there's arrows and slings that hit, which is basically the title of our presentation tonight. To everyone who is attending, please look after yourself during the webinar. Some of the slings and arrows we share are actually real statements that we have heard, but they may be triggering. Please feel free to mute or take a break as needed. We are very interested to hear your thoughts as we share and chat with each other. As Stephanie said, please feel free to put in your comments in the comment section and any questions in the Q&A section, as we would hate to miss a question. So today's title, Work-Life Unbalance, Slings and Arrows, is based on Hamlet's soliloquy in Act 3, a scene from Hamlet. So Rob is going to read an extract from that.
Okay. So the workplace is an arena where people who do not fit social cultural norms and expectations are like directly or indirectly stigmatized and discriminated against through policy, working practices, and everyday interactions, and they reflect what happens in the wider world. And we thought lots of Hamlet's soliloquy really reflected childless periods, people's experience in work environments. So don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole thing, just the first few lines, and although we may drop in other lines throughout the webinar. So I'm putting on my posh voice now. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. We think this really helps illustrate some of the dynamics involved in fertility journeys across the lifescape and in everyday workplace interactions, reactions and responses to them, and what options may be available. So lifescape is a word I invented in the hope that somebody else would pick it up and I become dead famous, and it hasn't happened. But rather than life course, which seems like a linear thing, and so it's a mixture of life course and landscape. So it's the lifescape because it sort of, I hope, reflects a mapping of stuff. You know, you go along and there's bumps and changes in the road and changes in direction, some of which you choose and some of which you don't. So that's why I'm using the word lifescape. Over to Anne.
That's an interesting term, Rob. It's the first time I've heard it, but I really like it. It just really describes this journey called life that we're all on, isn't it? We have bumps, we have ups and downs, we have beautiful scenery, we have stormy days. Great description. I'm going to steal it and use it too. When we were discussing what we were going to do this year, and Rob came up with slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, what struck me was we just don't know when these are going to strike. So what we're hoping to do today is just to put a few ideas on the table and hopefully plant some seed pods for you to then think about what this actually means for you. And we'll go through a few different strategies as we go on. So please indulge us now as we go into a role play where slings and arrows of insensitivity burst the protective bubble that we as childless, not by choice people sometimes put ourselves in. We hope this role play opens up discussion. Again, safety first. Please feel free to mute or step away if this is triggering. So imagine you're in a corporate office and we have all come into a Zoom meeting, very much like we're doing here. I'm going to be a hyperactive manager leading the team meeting, and Rob will voice the internal dialogue of one of the team. So you ready, Rob?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Hello, lovely people. How is everyone? I had such an exciting weekend. We had my daughter's gender reveal on the weekend, and guess what? Guess what? Guess what? It's one of each, a boy and a girl. Oh, wait, my phone is buzzing. Oh, who is this? Being disturbed. Oh my goodness, it is my grandson Dennis, all dressed up for book day. Oh, look, look, look. Can you see that? Can you see that? It's him dressed up as Paddington Bear. Doesn't he look gorgeous? Such a cute little boy. Oh, love him so much. You all saw him at our last Zoom meeting. He was eating his marmalade sandwich on my lap. Oh, you know what? It's school holidays soon. We should have our kids say hello at the next Zoom catch up. Janie, Dave, your kids are so cute. Been a while since I saw them. They'll be great. Bring them. James, you're a dad in waiting, aren't you? Oh, bring the ultrasound. I love looking at ultrasound. Amazing what they do with technology these days. Rob, Rob, you're a quiet one in our team. What's your story? Got a few kids hidden away somewhere? Or you're shooting blanks, mate?
Not the firing blanks. You're a Jaffa again. It's just like the lads at the last leaving do. Bloody James offered to come round and fix Ruth for me. How they laughed. Just like Sue said, he'll be getting a promotion now that he's a dad. There'll be the collection and the card and the photo and the group emails and the chats, and I'll be at the edge of the group. I can't face him. He's everything I should be. 3 failed cycles, the miscarriages. I can't say that I'm hollowed out. I'm collapsed inside. I've got to support Ruth. She goes through the worst of it. It's funny. Going to work was a place to get away from that, not knowing what to do or stay, or staying over, doing overtime or volunteering for stuff just to keep away from it because I didn't know what to do or say or how to be. Can't afford any more treatment. How are we going to go on? I had to walk away from the broom the other day because they were all going on about their kids, what the kids were doing, just like then. Nearly punched bloody Keith, a new fella, when he said maybe you didn't deserve kids. I mean, that was just... I can't go into work and say I really want to be a dad. I'm feeling broody. You know, I'm really jealous of you. So it's better just to keep a cap on it keep a cap on the volcano. You know, if I said anything like that, they'd rip the piss out of me more than they do already. I don't fit with the younger people. I don't know what they do. Don't understand their music. I don't fit with James and the rest of my sort of generation. They're all in a different life to me. I thought it'd be safe in this sort of from this sort of banter on Zoom, but there's no escape. It's every time they all start off with what the kids are doing, what aren't they doing? Look at this, look at that. Home, I thought would be a safe place from being invaded, but it's not. It's everywhere. It's all over. It's just everywhere. Seeing those kids, seeing my dreams in the lives of others, but not in my life. It's sucking the life out of me. So yeah, firing blanks. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, it's a good one, that one, though.
Yeah. So, to be or not to be, that's the question. Do we take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them? Do we say something? And if you do, are we taking on a sea of troubles? Are we going to make things better? Rob, what you were saying hit me so hard, so raw and powerful. So many areas of grief, people's words, the miscarriages, trying to keep work as a safe place. I know for me, work was a safe place for a very long time, because you went to work, that's where the grown-ups were. And I could forget about my own fertility journey. I could forget about whatever was going on. But that's not the case anymore, is it? So what Rob shared and what we've shared applies to both men and women. However, we've chosen to illustrate the male point of view here because one, Rob's really good at this stuff. And two, there is still very low awareness of what childless men think and feel. And I personally feel that the more we can bring awareness that childlessness is a male and female issue, the more we can work towards smashing the stigma around it. So, Rob, I think you had some things to say around, do we just shut up and put up? Or do we actually say something? Either way, I find in my experience, it's really difficult. So what does the people that you've spoken to, what are their thoughts?
Yeah, and I also want to include, so all that scenario was around a man who and his partner gone through infertility treatment. There's lots of people out there who are childless by circumstance, like myself. And a big part of that circumstance is economics. And obviously the link there between economics and the workplace. So if you're in a job like in Australia, there's FIFO, isn't there, where you fly in, fly out. I think the UK, it would be if you're working on the oil rigs, where you go and work for a set period of time and then you're off for a set period of time, and that puts a strain on a relationship. It puts another factor into forming a relationship and all those sort of things. So that link between economics and the workplace really highlights how, I think there was some research a while back that a lot of people get with their partners through the workplace as well, because it's a social space. So it really is a microcosm of wider society and the social cultural norms that are around us wherever we are in the world, and that's something we have to acknowledge, that I'm white Western, so I come with that sort of thing. If I wasn't, and I was from another area of the world with a different cultural aspect to reproduction, then it'd be different, but it's still there. And those norms are really quite pronatalist, and that's the idealization of family and reproduction and being a parent, and that how high status that is. And in some cultures that's really overt, it's really out there. In others it's sort of hidden, but it's still there as an underlying current and dynamic. And it's a fact it's often downplayed, if it, or acknowledged at all, is the impact of economics on fertility decisions and outcomes. So hence the importance of the workplace. There is a growing recognition of the effect of fertility decisions on people's workplace lives, including the losses that can be part of not becoming a parent, either naturally or through ART, IVF treatment. And I think it's really important to recognize that on average, and I'm really very aware that some people have been through IVF and it's not been successful, and other people may be considering it. It's not very successful. It's only about 20% successful, despite what all the advertising is. And one of the best unknown knowns is there are more childless men than childless women. Generally, so in the UK, it's around about 20% of the women are childless, and it's around about 25% of men. And that sort of goes all the way around the world, that sort of difference. The problem is, a technical problem, is that when when a baby's registered, and again goes for almost all the way around the world, apart from some Nordic countries, the mother's fertility history is taken, but not the father's. So you have a really accurate data on the levels of women who are childless, but it's all a bit iffy around the men because you don't have that comparable data. So it's one-off studies all around the place that I've done on that one. So in a workplace, it's consequently probably more childless men than is realized or acknowledged. And I've done a few studies around circumstantial male childless, men who wanted to be dad and didn't become them. And I was going to go some of those experiences of what the men have told me. So a good example of work impacting on fertility decisions, sorry, okay, I have birth trauma and I'm hard of hearing. So English is a second language to me. So I stumble over some words. So you're just going to have to put up with that. Sorry. So a good example of work impacting on fertility intentions and decisions is, a taxi driver was there. And he was an oldish chap, older than me even, amazingly. So he's about 70, he was just working for some pin money, actually, and he'd been doing taxiing for a number of years. I'd been married for over 40 years, but it wouldn't have been fair to leave her with me being away with the mining and the oil jobs, and originally in the army as well. They were for contractors, but you didn't know how long they would last. So you say, it wouldn't be fair that I wouldn't be away, I wouldn't be sharing the parenting. So that's a really direct influence on people's decisions. And again, goes with the FIFO and short-term contracts, all that sort of thing. Gig economy now, where, either, they phone you up, say, can you come in? And if you can't, you get the sack, that sort of thing. So the moving around for work was highlighted by a university researcher, actually, who was 33, Jack. We must move around for work, so it's hard to build relationships. Once you settle, it's much easier to start a family. And along the same lines, a factory boss, actually, Peter, said, in my 30s, I had to move from factory to factory, and there just wasn't time or opportunity to meet anyone for a serious relationship. And he moved sort of all around the country, and he'd be in a place for maybe 9 months or 18 months, and just wouldn't get the social networks along that round. And in the workplace, many of the chaps I spoke to sort of reported stuff. So teacher Jeremy said, when I went for promotion, it was always the parents who got the job. I often wondered, is it because I'm childless was a factor? And there is some element around that. And one of the things might be that if you have a shared experience with your boss, you've got a social connection. And it's certainly something I noticed in work. But as from the role play, it was one of the women from work who said, actually, now his wife's pregnant, he'll get a promotion. And he did. And that's when it sort of opened my eyes. This is what happens. And consultant Russell, high global sort of player, said he was excluded. People with kids just have no conception of how alienated people like me feel. People talking at work, they talk about their kids, they talk about their experience raising their family. We're on the fringe. I'm alienated from that, and I feel like an alien. And Marcus's girlfriend, he was 30 when I interviewed him, and she was a nurse. And it's like you had children, you got all sorts of flexibility in the shifts, less night shift, less weekend, you get the holidays. And that's like, yeah, I've got children, I've got to be off when they're off. So, but it was to the utter detriment of people without children. She gets all the crappy shifts, a ridiculous number of nights, Christmas, New Year's, everything else. So there's that structural thing, and certainly my first wife worked in a bank, and in banking you have to book your holidays a year in advance, and it was just don't bother in the summer holidays if you haven't got kids. A major thing for childless people then is presenteeism, so staying in work, so to fill in for people who are going off looking after their kids and what have you, and either volunteering or being persuaded or forced or expected to cover for their colleagues who are parents. So Edward, it was awkward at work when there was a collection and a card signing for someone who was having a baby. That hurt. It was an unwanted reminder, as was the annoyance when a colleague dropped their work to dash off for the kids at short notice. The assumption was others picked up the work on top of their own. And again, this was picked up in the work at MMU in the complex fertility journeys project and report. This expectation that people would be available, and this the time off and that is built in. But one of the other things, like childless people are often expected to be there available to care, not only for colleagues, but also for family. So they may well have a duty of care that's not recognized by the employer. So as Marcus and Edward's experience showed, childless are often positioned as being available. It's almost like they don't have a life outside work. The childless are often first option carers for their parents and relations. The needs of the childless need recognizing, in my opinion. So over to Anne.
Thank you for that, Rob. Amazing, all these interesting insight from people, talking about what their lives are like. There were a few things there that really struck me when you said about, when you have things in common with the boss and you form that rapport and you get to know each other. And what do they talk about? They talk about their kids, and that, they go to the school sports together. I've actually been in a situation where, because I had nothing to say in a meeting about children and I kept quiet, I was actually berated after the meeting because my boss felt that me being silent, I embarrassed him. And it wasn't that I had nothing to say, it was I had nothing to say about children. But yeah, that's another type of sling and arrow. Be the presenteeism, where you expect it to pick up other people's jobs because they've run off. The holidays is a really interesting one. Don't even bother about school holidays because other people who have children get first priority. And yet, what do we do? Do we just be quiet, or do we actually say something? But for some of us, it is really scary to say something. It's just easier to be invisible. And by being invisible, we distort our identity because we're trying to fit in. We're trying to stay under the radar. I've just talked about a situation where I had nothing to say and I was trying to sit there in a corner and be very invisible. And that, from my experience, it has cost me my well-being as well as career opportunities, because I was just too scared to open my mouth. Um, and there was so much going on, and there was all this child-focused things. And mind you, I wasn't working in a childcare or a school. I was working for a high technology company. So it was very interesting. Um, and so, again, that whole thing of we need to advocate for ourselves, we need to speak out. But the reality is, when you've already got so much going on, as in the role play, Rob, where you're talking, there's already so much grief we're dealing with. How much energy do we still have to actually then go and advocate for ourselves? I know I had none for all those years. And again, I always encourage people, always, please focus on safety first. If you choose to speak out, ensure you're in an emotionally safe environment. And we'll go a little bit into what that's about. Because feeling unsafe already adds to grief and trauma. And again, there's only so much energy that we have. And for most of us, we're keen to do a really good job. And we want to make sure that the energy that we do have is devoted to productivity, not managing triggers. So, how do you keep yourself in an emotionally safe space? Apparently, Socrates is known to have given 2 rulings. We're doing well here, Rob. Socrates, Shakespeare. We're showing our age, I think. So Socrates said there's only 2 rules: know oneself and care for oneself. So again, be aware of mental and physical reactions to slings and arrows. Look at when somebody says something like, here's my grandson dressed as Paddington Bear. What's your reaction? I mean, I wrote that script and I cringed when I heard myself say it. Do you freeze? Do you get angry? Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you get anxious? Do you want to go out and punch something? Do you want to go and sit in the bathroom and have a good cry? Been there, done that. So again, if you know yourself and you understand how you're reacting to these comments, but also attitudes that people have, like, people might not say anything, but there's that expectation that you're going to stay late because Jane has gone to pick up her kids from school, or, you'll finish off the report because somebody else has report card day at school or whatever. So when you understand how you react, you can work through strategies of how you're going to manage yourself in the workday. So there's grounding exercises, there's breathing. You can write down what you're feeling and park it for processing after the meeting. I find that really useful in a work environment because I'm taking notes anyway. So if I'm starting to write other stuff, nobody knows whether I'm processing a feeling or I'm writing it. I'm giving things away here. I hope my manager is not listening to this. Do you leave the environment if possible? Again, in a Zoom meeting, it's so obvious if you turn the video off and you walk away. In real life, you can probably need to go to the bathroom and walk off. The other thing about caring for oneself is setting boundaries. It is okay to say no to a baby shower, unless it's part of your job description. Think about, do you really want to go there and then spend the next 3 days trying to recover from it? So again, think about what your boundaries are and have a strategy for processing what has happened. Talk to a friend, a counselor or a coach, do exercise. Personally, I've started doing weekly combat classes that I find are really helpful to help me process what I'm going through. So the reality is we can't control what comes out of people's mouths. And we're in a workplace and someone's commented and said it is particularly challenging because we don't really have the choice. Like in our role play, I'm the crazy manager, and well, you don't actually have a choice. You got to put up with me, right? But we can control our own reactions, how we respond, and how we interact with others. So I encourage the people listening here seek out people who can coach and guide you in deflecting slings and arrows of insensitivity. For starters, there's actually a webinar later today by Sherry Johnson on 5 keys to answering the insensitive remarks with grace. So there's resources to learn from. The World Childless Week website has lots and lots of things around how to manage this sort of stuff. Learn to look for that information, talk to people, really look at how you can care for yourself. And I think one of the things, again, when we were talking, Rob, we were saying that with the growing rate of childlessness among men and women, and yet we are such a hidden demographic, it would be so good if we could find a way that we can reduce the distress that we go through. And I think one of the ways that would probably help is if we had allies. What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
I think allyship is a thing that I first heard from you. So I think it's probably grown from Australia, and but it's making its way up. And how would you define it, allyship? Have you got something around that? And I guess what you have to do is sort of make your own,
Yeah.
and that
So,
might. Sorry, after you.
sorry. Yeah, allyship is a big thing here at the moment. You know, we talk a lot about being an ally to various different demographics of people. So there's the allyship with the indigenous population. There's allyship with the LGBTIQA community. There's being an ally with people with lived experience of mental health. You know, there's people who wear badges that says, I'm an ally, you are safe with me. And so there's many definitions on the web, various training courses, different demographics define it differently. The one I really like is actually from inclusiveemployers.co.uk. So it's a UK website. So an ally is defined as someone who is not a member of a marginalized group, but wants to support and take action to help others in that group. So again, it's somebody outside of our childless community. So it could be somebody who has children, but they want to help us stand up for ourselves. They want to help us find a voice. So, for example, in that role play, if Janie wanted to be an ally, you know, and she had a good relationship with Crazy Me, she, after the meeting, she could have come up to me and said, you know, I don't think it's appropriate to bring the kids into a Zoom meeting. How about we have an after hours virtual family catch up? And it's an opt in or an opt out. So that's some of the things that allies can do. Does that sort of answer the question?
It does. I think that also edges to the EDI aspect of things. Equality, diversity, and inclusion. Okay. Policies that a lot of companies have and a lot of HR are familiar with, and there could well be something already in the policies that are there that can be adapted. And again, with the allyship, because we're sort of a hidden population, we're sort of hidden from ourselves as well. So there's something around. I know you said go. That thing was going outside the group, but actually to find your group as well.
Yeah.
In and a part of it might well be educating others, not only people. I'm going to go upstream, downstream, and side stream. So side stream people around us, but also upstream, to HR, to line managers, even higher, and to people just around you. So yeah. So there is an example of this at Bristol University I came across through the work at MMU on the complex fertility journeys report, which is up on the web there, so you can download that. It's very useful. So Bristol University's Equality and Diversity Staff Inclusion Policy lists triggers such as conversations about pregnancy, photographs on display and or posted on social media. And that was a very big thing. One company, they had a board above the photocopier and printer, and it was just full of baby photos and cards and thank you cards and all that sort of thing. So it's an unsafe space for people who weren't parents, who wanted to be parents. An important strategic action would be to include the Childless Equality and Diversity Policy and Practice. And similarly, research shows that childless and older employees, particularly men, may not have the same level of support as those with family networks. So this changes across your life course, but also your work life course as well. As you move in and out of relationships, in and out of work, it all changes. So, you know, how are older people viewed in the workplace? How are older solo living or childless people viewed in the workplace? What support do they have? And are they relied on informally or formally to pick up the slack when things are happening, to be the safety net, the constant safety net?
Yeah.
If it's a constant safety net, then you've got to look at what strain it's under. Yeah. And just check in to make sure it's not under too much strain and it's going to fail. And then you're going to blame the safety net rather than the circumstances of what caused the incident. And it's really important then when managing staff and absence and return to work processes, that sort of a thing. So I just want to say a little bit more about men, because men are extremely vulnerable from the reproductive side of things. There's a lot more of evidence around the impact of the environment on sperm quality. And also stress is a direct link to sperm quality as well. So if somebody is going through IVF or trying naturally to become a parent, and they're being loaded at work with stress, it can in fact affect the sperm quality. And what do men do? Why don't men talk? This is a big thing, you know, just talk. Well, it's not the talking, it's the listening. And men have been conditioned from a very early age not to talk, not to express themselves verbally, but through action. So if you look on Facebook and just look at when a baby is called my little man, my little soldier, and sometimes they are babies, but you don't get the same for girls. It's my little princess, not my little soldieress or anything like that. And that's just indicative of how pernicious and under the radar this gender role thing, how early it starts and why it's embedded in men. So inside of men is that volcano. Actually, I've got all this stuff here happening and I want to express it. But through years of conditioning, I've been told not to cry, not to be soft, is what we'd call it. Then you've got to be hard. And how do they express themselves? Through actions, going and doing something, drinking too much, taking risks, all that sort of thing in their food and their diet. Okay, so Swedish studies found that out, that comparing contact fathers, non-contact fathers, and childless men, the childless men and non-contact fathers, much more at risk from mortality and ill health through risky behaviors, smoking, drinking, risky sports, that sort of thing. And so why is that? When you become a father, you've got a certain narrative you can occupy that maybe you can't when you're not a father. And if you're out of sync, and I certainly fell out of sync in my mid-30s when I was terribly broody and my colleagues were having babies, but I couldn't express it. How could I say that to anyone? Apart from, I did actually say it to one guy who asked me, because we were great colleagues, used to have brews, and when he became a dad, I couldn't face him. I just completely went round the building the other way, anything to avoid him, because I was so jealous of him. So there's something around that. So maybe for HR, other colleagues, that actually, why is he going out supposedly having loads of fun? But as I said, depends on the generational thing. It could well be he's just avoiding something else. And that's how men are sort of conditioned to act in that area.
And it's
Hope that
so
sort of,
interesting. Sorry,
sorry.
Rob, go on.
No,
No, I was going to say, it's so interesting what you're saying about men don't talk. It's action. So again, for any managers who are listening to this, or anybody who wants to be an ally, observe what's going on with your colleagues. Behavior speaks volumes. Educate yourself. One of the big things in the training courses I've attended about being an ally is when someone isn't participating, to take notice and ask yourself what's going on. How can I help that person? So a dear friend of mine who is a grandmother actually said, if someone never mentions their children, be aware that they are not hiding them in an attic. There is a story there that they don't want to share. Respect their privacy. Don't make assumptions. Don't ask them why they don't have children. Be kind to them. So, again, there's lots of little things that people can do. Again, just to encourage people in the workplace, to make them inclusive. In our scenario, Rob doesn't mention his children. Well, what's Rob interested in? How do we bring Rob into the conversation? If we're going to have lunch, can we talk about, Rob's interest in photography, cricket? There are millions of things to talk about. So again, really encourage people to, I love that bit about education, just educating yourself and using the words of thought leaders to educate others. So there's so many. Tomorrow, yes, 21st, World Childless Week has a webinar on including childlessness within the equity, diversity, and inclusivity agenda at work. Have a look at the website. That will be a great one to go to, be a great one to share with other people. There are so many thought leaders on TED Talks, Harvard Business Review, LinkedIn. Rob, you've just done a few podcasts that I saw on LinkedIn. You've written a few blogs. And again, one of the things that I have found over the years is people might not listen to us, but they'll listen to a thought leader. So, like I could say, hey, Rob's done this really interesting podcast. You might be interested to listen to it. They're more likely to listen to that than if I said, we need to spend more time giving males airtime around how they're feeling. So I've just looked at the time and we have actually been very close to closing. Rob, you had something to say?
Yeah, just very quickly. Margaret Thatcher, one of her best ministers, she said of him, I can't remember what his name is. Let's call him Fred. Fred comes to me with a problem, but he also brings a solution. And so, going and saying, well, this was difficult, or maybe actually you could look at Bristol University, or like you say. So, if you signpost solutions to others, you're also sort of signposting solutions to yourself as well. And you grow, you learn, and you never know, you may become a leader in your company and your workplace on this issue. And it may be a different career path, one you're not anticipating, but it could be another area. You could become expert.
Yeah. And, again, for anyone out there who feels alone in their childlessness. You may be the only one in your organization, but please don't forget you have this huge community that Stephanie has set up with World Childless Week. There's so many people on these seminars. There's so many people on the blogs. There's the Facebook page. So while you may feel alone, the reality is we're actually not alone. We do have our tribe. We do have our community. And, you know, huge thank you to Steph for actually having set this up and the amount of work that goes into this. So this topic is a huge topic. And I think, you know, Rob, when we were planning, we meandered all over the place. We hope that what we've done today has given you some ideas, planted some seed pods for further conversation. This is very much the tip of the iceberg. And one of the reasons that I kept saying at the start is, you know, safety first, mute, leave the conversation if it's too much, was actually to role model that you have the choice of how you react and when you choose to interact or not. I know it takes courage. I know it takes a ton of courage. You know, I've been there, and a lot of what I didn't do impacted my well-being. So, which is why I think now I'm really passionate about, you know, look after yourself, find ways to learn how to react, and find your allies. So thank you again for being here. Sorry, Rob.
Sorry, honestly, last thing. Yeah, Colin in comments said about the same for mental health. Absolutely, and there's a great overlap between the two. And I think Amanda did, has also said in the comments about she approached HR and EDI and it didn't go anywhere, but then she approached somebody else, went through a different route, and something happened. So there's to keep going on that. And on slings and arrows, you know, build your shield, but also maybe take some of those arrows and put them in your quiver and get your own arrows and build your own arrows so that you have your defenses, which I think is what you were saying there. So just and look around. Yeah. That's it. Sorry, I'll let you finish now.
No, that's all right. Like I said, we can talk about this for hours, I think. Rob and I have been in the workplace for a long time, so we've had lots of experiences, positive and negative. But thank you so much for everyone who's attended. I've been looking at the comments. There's some great comments there. Again, like we said, we know this is hard and it takes time, but hang in there and believe in yourself, I think, is what my outro is going to be. Yeah. So please look after yourselves. Be aware of what triggers you and find ways to manage them.
Indeed.
Steph, I think you can come back in.